Caracas and in the other cities as barricades again going up across major thoroughfares. Dozens remain behind bars, including charismatic opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez. At least 12 killed in the biggest challenge to the country's leftist government since the death of Hugo Chavez 10 months ago. His successor, Nicolas Maduro, calling for a national peace conference this week. With us to talk about it, political scientist Natalia Brandler. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And joining us from New York, Gregory Wilpert, co-founder of VenezuelaAnalysis.com. Thanks for coming on as well. Let me start with you, Natalia. This offer of a peace conference, should the opposition take it up?
Well, you know, I think it's very politically correct to say, no, you cannot go to a peace conference. But the real situation is that the past experience of the Venezuelan opposition has been that Maduro calls for a dialogue, and then he asks the opposition, you can come, but you cannot speak, as it happened when Capriles was invited to speak with Maduro. Now, this
Enrique
time,
Capriles, who ran for president.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the major opposition leader, although he's not the only one. And
in fact, the two could be meeting today. There's a gathering of governors taking place.
He said he's considering it, but of course, if you want to go to a dialogue in Venezuela, a country that has no free press, where the media has been, even CNN was menaced to have the information cut, you know, they could not transmit. There's no free press, there's no paper for the newspapers, so it's a way of letting them die. There has been a very strong repression in the country. The National Guard, you know, attacking protesters. So you can go to a dialogue, but there has to be some, you know, conditions to go to a dialogue. One of them is the liberation of all the students that are still in prison. The other one would be to unarm those the armed groups that have repressed students and that are supported by the government. And the third condition would be to let free the prisoners, political prisoners, such as Simonovic, that has been in prison, and now Leopoldo Lopez, who has been in prison too. So there can be a dialogue if there is a fair dialogue. And I would say the dialogue should be, you know, the dialogue should probably invite some international presence, maybe by, you know, United Nations or, OEA, or some of the, some credible international mediators.
All right, Gregory Wilpert, do you agree with all those preconditions?
Well, I think the preconditions are kind of silly because the students who are in prison are really ones where it's quite certain that they have participated in violence against state institutions. I mean, the vast majority of the people who were arrested, you know, just in the sweeps that happened right after the violent demonstrations have been released, and the only ones who are still in prison or who are still under arrest are the ones who were pretty certain that they were, you know, damaging public property. And I mean, I find it kind of a dangerous precedent to let people like that free, considering that it would represent an act of impunity. Perhaps it could be a gesture of goodwill, but still. And connecting this to these other people, such as Simonovic, I mean, I think is also kind of silly. He's in prison for having participated in the 2002 coup attempt, which has nothing to do with the current issues at hand.
What about Leopoldo Lopez?
That, I think, is certainly a more reasonable demand, considering that I think personally it's not completely clear to what extent he's guilty of the violence that has been taking part on the part of the demonstrators. So in that sense, I think that is certainly something that could be negotiable. But the problem really is for the negotiations is that other than these preconditions, there's nothing really that the opposition is demanding other than Maduro resigning. So, I mean, it's, in that sense, the discussions are kind of doomed from the start. I mean, they say that the demonstrations have to do with crime and insecurity and economic problems, but they don't have any concrete demands around those issues. So the only concrete demand is Maduro's resignation, which of course he will not give into.
Well, I would say that that is not the only at all the only demand. I think the protest of the students never started saying that Maduro should resign. That was, there's always groups that talk about resignation, and of course some of the politicians have said that. But the students start with peaceful demonstrations, and I'm going to stress that because that is the truth. Those are autonomous student groups that even have difference between them. They gather against some of the very, very strong economic crisis that is in Venezuela. There's shortage, there's crime, 25,000 homicides last year. And we have to remember that the protest started because one student at one university in Táchira, in the inside of the country, was almost raped, and that was like the drop because there had been many, many crimes within the university. So they were protesting because they wanted security. And
but to pick up on Gregory Wilpert's point, the opposition has always seemed a little bit fractured in Venezuela. It comes in several forms. I just want to point out one example. On Sunday, retired Army General Angel Vivas, sporting a flak jacket, an assault rifle, a handgun, addressing neighbors from the balcony of his home in Caracas, accusing the government of supporting Cuban-backed militias and refusing to hand himself in.
I made some recommendations, and for making those recommendations to unarmed citizens to use wires to defend themselves from criminal gangs, troops, tanks and weapons. For that, they want to put me in jail. I have made the decision not to turn myself in.
We have identified those who placed the wire, and they're going to go to jail for murder. And I have issued the order to detain the general who is retired, who called for that wire to be placed, and who trained these fascists. I have ordered the detention of Angel Vivas. They need to find him and bring him. Murderer.
Asesino. Of course, as far as we know, he's not yet behind bars. What is interesting, though, as well, and you see it there, is there are a lot of people who still support Nicolas Maduro, who still support the government.
Yes, of course. There's, I would say, half of the country supports, but the other half doesn't support. You were asking before, why is the opposition divided? And I'm going to say it's not that it's divided, it's a democratic opposition where you have a wide range of different parties with different tendencies. So it is already very important. They have been able to unite. You have leftist tendencies to rightists, social Christian Democrats, social Democrats. So it's a wide range. So it's not like in Maduro's, the government, which is united with one only, totalitarian discourse that forces people to behave and say a certain thing.
All right, and Gregory Wilpert, people who don't follow Venezuela on a day-to-day, the question they're asking watching all this unfold the past 2 weeks is, why is one of the world's top oil producers have these problems of empty supermarket shelves and chronic crime?
Well, those are two separate questions, really. One is the crime problem, I think, has been slowly addressed by the government and has actually been shown to be gone down in the past year. So they're making some progress in that. It is a terrible problem, and it's one that the government has neglected for far too long. But that's separate from the economic issues, which really have to do with the problem of trying to create a socialist economy in the context of global capitalism. And for a long time, the government had succeeded, I think, to some extent. But after Chavez's death, there was basically a run on the currency, partly provoked by the private business sector seeing an opportunity, and partly provoked by accumulated economic problems, particularly the gap between the official exchange rate and the black market exchange rate, which has really exacerbated the problem now. And the government is also trying to address that by introducing new currency exchange mechanisms to essentially get rid of the black market and to resolve those problems. But they have the shortages and so on, and the inflation have to do with the currency control, which was necessary at one point during the 2002 coup attempt in order to prevent capital flight that was really massive back in 2002, 2003.
All right, I see Natalia Brondler shaking her head, but unfortunately we're out of time, so I'm going to have to leave it there. But I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank
you so much.
Gregory Wilpert for being with us from New York City. Thank you for being with us. Stay with us. Much more to come here on France 24. We'll have more news, all the day's business and sports. Dan Levy will draw the curtain on the Winter Olympics. Stay with us.